Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge Week 14 quarterback and tight ends rankings video. The running backs and the wide receivers videos both already came out, so go check those out if you missed them, if you didn't catch them. And you can find these rankings up on the website at www.theFFForge.com, along with my flex rankings are also up there as of Thursday. Usually Thursday mornings. You can find links in the description as well to the website to each of the positional rankings. And as always, we'll cover any injuries and interesting usage information that could impact things throughout the week or impact how we view some of these players that I think was important to share with you. That information comes from JJ Zacharias and Data Dump that he puts out there every Monday morning. I go through it, see what I think is important going forward, share that with you, and maybe give some context to that as well. And then we'll cover how I did with my loves and my fades last week. Let's get down into this injury for the quarterback. For the most part, it wasn't too bad of an injury week, especially coming off of 2 weeks ago when it was terrible. Justin Herbert broke his non-throwing hand, might play. I am currently ranking him. We'll see, though. No guarantee that he ends up playing. Had surgery on that on Monday. Interesting usage information. Jared Goff has been a top 10 fantasy quarterback 3 of the past 4 weeks. We kind of could have seen this coming. We knew he had all dome games coming up after a disappointing start to the season and some good high-scoring matchups as well. And it's not like he was playing bad. It just wasn't turning out to be great for fantasy purposes. So here we are. It's been working out pretty well as of late. Lamar Jackson has scored fewer than 10 fantasy points 6 times his entire career, and guess what? And that's like not including injury games. So that's all games with 20 plus pass attempts. 3 of those 6 times all came over the past 3 games. So historically horrible slump for Lamar Jackson. Tough to expect it going forward, but obviously there's something wrong with that Baltimore offense, and I don't know if they're going to fix it or not. They've said that they're going to try to get Derrick Henry more involved. I assume that's as a part of trying to get this offense back on track, and maybe that will help. That obviously doesn't necessarily help Lamar Jackson, but, you got to think, obviously I'm not going to rank him like he's going to score 10 or fewer fantasy points yet again. But his rankings are hurting. For my loves and my fades last week, I loved Trevor Lawrence, so that works out. And I faded Joe Burrow, but I ranked him like dead on. So early in the week last week, Joe Burrow was being ranked like 6th in ECR. I think the ECR ended up pulling back on him. People got like a little more, realistic about his output. And I think he finishes like 11th. I think I had him finished 10th, ranked 10th maybe, and ECR was maybe like 9th. So at the end of the day, we kind of ranked him correctly and everything, so fine there. And so I don't know if you want to call that a bad fade or whatever. The whole point of the fade was really just like, hey, there's still some guys that we should be starting over Joe Burrow. So I think I was right in that aspect. Hopefully right on which guys that you should be starting over him as well. But ends up coming through with a good game. Did not suck, and that was a concern too of mine, that maybe it's a little too slow on the uptake this first week back, because he's shown rust problems early on in seasons in the past, and this being really his second game of the season, I thought there was some concern there. So happy to see him come back looking good, firing that ball, and hoping for more of that going forward. But here's my first tier of the quarterbacks for Week 14 over here on the left-hand column. This is my average fantasy points per week run through a filter, and it spits out average fantasy points per week with a twist of consistency, because consistency matters. And this does outperform in terms of finding out guys who are going to help you win more weeks throughout a season. I backtracked and compared it to average fantasy points per week, and it does perform better than that on determining getting the quarterback that scores more points more weeks throughout the season, based on this score being higher. So it's a good stat. It's a good one to look at. For the implied point total spread, those are obviously the early week Vegas numbers, and they just help to give us help to guide the rankings. Josh Allen, Matt Stafford, Dak Prescott, these are the 3 guys I'm just getting out there and playing this week. I will say, I do have a little bit of concern with the Matt Stafford ranking, not really because of how he performed last week, but that doesn't help. We would feel even better about it if he had a better week last week. But also, Arizona, they might be running a lot. Arizona has been pretty good at limiting quarterbacks, fantasy production, and through the air, limiting the air attack against them. They've been pretty solid. So there are some concerns there, but Vegas thinks that they're going to score plenty, so hopefully that's going to be because Matt Stafford throws them touchdowns yet again to probably Devontae Adams and maybe Puka Nacua. That's going to bring us on to this next tier. We've got Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, my love of the week, Bo Nix, and Lamar Jackson for my top 9 quarterbacks and on the screen. Jared Goff, loving him this week. He's been on a hot streak as we covered. He's playing in a dome again, whether it's home or away, it's still going to be in a dome. And he's got the offense of Dallas on the other side of the field. So hopefully it will be a nice back and forth affair. Hopefully won't be missing Amon-Ra St. Brown too much. They did well. Putting, Jameson Williams into kind of that alpha role worked out for him just fine last week against Green Bay, and that's a tough, I would say a tougher defense than Dallas overall. But Dallas' defense has been improving. Got some pieces back a couple weeks ago, and that's definitely shown, and I think they might get another piece back in their secondary, which would be helpful. So there are some concerns here, but I'm still going to play him. Bo Nix, I might be a little bit high on. I don't know. Do I have a problem? Usually I've been low guy on him throughout the season, so I don't think I have a Bo Nix problem. I just feel good about him this week. Hopefully that feeling is not misguided. And Lamar Jackson, we're going to give it another go against Pittsburgh. Confidence factor, not the highest, but like Patrick Mahomes going up against Houston, it's tough. Jalen Hurts against the Chargers, nothing's guaranteed there. So, I think these two have like your highest ceilings of the week. Bo Nix probably right in that as well. And of course, Lamar Jackson gets involved in that because he's Lamar Jackson. And then Patrick Mahomes has been the best quarterback in fantasy football in the season, consistency-wise at least. And Jalen Hurts not too far behind. So you can see why they all end up making it into this tier. And then I do have a tier break right before we get to Jayden Daniels, who obviously coming back from injury and everything, there would be some concerns about, especially against this Minnesota defense, which is a good defense. And you tend to run against them more than pass against them. And then, how much will Jayden Daniels be running? There's plenty of concerns there. You could even sit him this week if you felt better about Brissett. Understandable. Going against the Los Angeles Rams, one of the best defenses in the league, a little bit lower on Jacoby Brissett than we have been in other weeks. Baker Mayfield going against New Orleans, limited upside. They might be able to run the ball a lot. They've got their running back, and he's going to be getting more usage yet again this week and on the season, just barely above average. Jordan Love, just a little bit below average on the season for fantasy purposes. But nice high implied point total against Chicago here, which has not been the best defense on the season, but another defense where I do have some concerns of them getting a little bit better. But I definitely think any given day, Jordan Love could have a big game against them as well. So we're going to give a little bit, we're going to bet on that a little bit. Daniel Jones, don't feel too bad against him, against Jacksonville, kind of just, once again, right in this grouping. But it has been rougher as of late. So confidence has waned a little bit. And then Caleb Williams, I ended up moving down in my rankings, of course. Tough matchup against Green Bay. Implied point total is not too fantastic, but he has that rushing upside that could always help things along. That Chicago offense team looked really good last week against Philadelphia. Was that because it was against Philadelphia? You would think not. Philadelphia is still a good team overall on the season, but when you watch them, they don't look as good as some of the numbers I always tend to look. So it's tough to say, but I still feel comfortable enough playing anybody in this tier and hoping for good things to happen. Justin Herbert, I am going to fade this week, and this comes down to where the experts, once again, it's kind of one of those fades. The experts have him ranked as quarterback 11 on the week. This offense has tended to struggle more than not without Joe Alt with that offensive line banged up. And Philadelphia's defense has found its pass rush as of late and come together more cohesively as a unit. So I definitely tend to agree with Vegas's lower implied point total. I think this could be another week where this offense doesn't look like the juggernaut that we thought it might be coming into the season. And the juggernaut, it kind of looked like it would be when that offensive line at least had Joe Alt. We never saw it with Rashawn Slater, too. Could you imagine if they had that offensive line being healthy this year? I think things would look a little different. And then we've got Trevor Lawrence here at the bottom of this tier, going against Indianapolis, implied point total. Don't have the most faith in him, have less faith in him than Jordan Love, but also we're right in there. So hopefully, if you're playing him, he comes through for you again this week. That's going to bring us on to the next tier of quarterbacks, which I think is just the rest of them. I didn't end up making two tiers here. So Sam Darnold's been disappointing on the season. Atlanta, Jekyll and Hyde of a defense. They could end up running the ball a lot too. Heavy favorites in this game. So a lot of reasons that it might not come through for Sam Darnold yet again. Tua Tagovailoa going against the Jets. You could see why. Maybe he ends up having a good week. Aaron Rodgers against Baltimore, Tyrod Taylor against Miami. You could see why he ends up having a good week. CJ Stroud against Kansas City, Tyler Shuck against Tampa Bay. That could go any which way, really, but wouldn't bet on it too highly. Shedeur Sanders against Tennessee. Could see a decent enough week. Kirk Cousins against Seattle. Maybe they got to pass a lot. Cam Ward, J.J. McCarthy, Geno Smith to wrap this up. Crazy that we got Cam Ward and J.J. McCarthy ahead of Geno Smith now. But Geno Smith going against Denver and the season that he's had is pretty ugly. J.J. McCarthy going against Washington. You could see how maybe he ends up having a mediocre week. It could end up being fine. And Cam Ward's been, doing a little bit better, but really bad matchup. I almost feel like maybe this should be this. That doesn't feel good, but I feel like that's maybe the right call. I don't know. Maybe that's not the right call at all. But you can see J.J. McCarthy, fantasy-wise, was doing better than Cam Ward on the season. And that is it for the quarterbacks. Let's get on to the tight ends. I do not have any tight end injuries to report, so that's good. So let's get right on into the interesting usage information. We got Darren Waller. He came into a full workload at a 69% target share. Now, that's not technically a full workload, but that matches where he was at in weeks 5 and 6 before his injury, I think, in week 7. And there had been like a 1 or 2 week kind of build up there prior to that. So we're kind of at what appears to be his baseline already. So apparently he came back nice and healthy. They allowed him to get healthy. So that's good, coming into this week as long as he had no setbacks. Gunnar Helm and Chig are now getting on the field at the same rate. That's the Tennessee tight ends. So a little bit of a downgrade to Chig, a little upgrade to Gunnar Helm. If you know anything about my offseason scouting on the draft class, loved me some Gunnar Helm. So not too surprised that he's going to overcome Chig by the end of the season as their starting tight end going into next year, and would maybe have some fantasy interest in that next year if we could trust this offense a little more. It appears that Darnell Washington may have taken over at tight end 1 role in Pittsburgh. Talk about tight ends that I love. Darnell Washington. We have been talking about this a little bit over the last maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks even, and here it is. So maybe that's his role. I love him. Oronde Gadsden has been below 6.1 full PPR fantasy points per game in each game over 3 straight games coming into week 14. So, yeah, it was really, really hot there for a little bit with Oronde Gadsden throughout that time. I was holding back a little bit, trying not to buy into it too much, and so far it hasn't come through as of late, so just keep that in mind. And then I loved Mike Gesicki last week, but I also had him ranked as like tight end 35, which basically means don't play him. Nonetheless, it did not come through, but it was a Hail Mary love anyways. And I faded Harold Fannin Jr., who ends up being a tight end 1, or maybe because of Hunter Henry's performance last night, maybe ended up being tight end 13 on the week. I'm not sure if he was 11 or 12, but just basically ends up being a tight end 1 in half PPR scoring. Gets a long touchdown on that, and I can't really anticipate that to happen every week, but he was very involved in terms of him being on the field at a very high rate, so that's promising. I'm still a little bit hesitant to buy into it too much for the same concerns that I had last week with the quarterback style of play, but somebody asked if they should drop him last week on Sunday, and I kind of said I'm fine dropping him, but also maybe just wait and see one more week, see what happens this last week. So I feel good about that piece of advice, and we'll see where that goes going forward. Like I said, not totally buying into Harold Fannin right now in that offense with that quarterback, but he came through last week. Trey McBride, so bad fade. Dalton Kincaid, Tyler Warren, Travis Kelce, and Brock Bowers are all in my first tier. I think you can understand why they're the first tier guys. These are going to be the top 5 tight ends for most people's rankings. We don't really have to get into too much detail if you've got them, play him. Although I guess maybe that's not fully true about Dalton Kincaid here. So Dalton Kincaid is my love of the week here for the tight ends. He's been a top 5 tight end on the season on a per game basis, especially when you consider consistency with a twist of consistency. So based on how I look at him, he's one of these top 5 guys. Those are the 5 highest scoring tight ends on the season for fantasy football purposes, or 5 best tight ends. Cincinnati is the best tight end matchup, and it's not even close between them and second place, second best tight end matchup. They have allowed 19.3 half PPR points per game to the tight end position on average. That's insanely high. So it's not even like, oh, the second, it's just like a bad year for tight ends in general. No, that's not the case. The second place tight end here team allows 14.1, so a full 5.2 fewer fantasy points on average per game to the second best tight end matchup is what I was trying to say. Let's get on to this second tier as I fix the words coming out of my mouth. And over here on the leftmost column, just kind of reference that. This is average fantasy points per game with a twist of consistency on a scale of 0 to 36. That's how we get that consistency involved in that. And then here's your average targets per game. And here are the Vegas spread. And then in between them, I have the over-under, which helps us to build this implied point total. So it gives us a good idea of touchdown upside, which I do factor pretty heavily for tight ends. Data that I have looked at and data that I created, research that I've done on my own, heavily suggested that actually, like, boom or bust for a tight end is going to be more important to helping you to win more games throughout a season than having a consistent tight end, not quarterback, tight end. So that's generally true just as a total, as a whole for tight ends. So I do tend to hunt for touchdowns to a certain extent. Now, we get a really consistent floor and you have a really strong team. There's no problem just taking the points so that it doesn't hurt your team if they have a bust type of game. So, you kind of balance things out. Brenton Strange, I feel like a bad game's coming here, but it's been good. Going against Indianapolis here, nicer implied point total than a couple guys that I have right behind him. But Kyle Pitts, this ranking is somewhat dependent on no Drake London. Seattle teams target their tight ends at a very high rate against Seattle, so that's a good thing. And then no Drake London has helped. Kyle Pitts has just been getting a good amount of targets on the season, but it doesn't hurt when Drake London's out. So between those two factors, I just think the floor is insanely high in terms of feeling safe with playing Kyle Pitts this week. Once again, if there's no Drake London at the very least, and still he won't fall down too much if Drake London comes back in the rankings. Juwan Johnson, it doesn't work out last week, but he gets like a really, really high target share. Gets, I think, 9 targets was it last week. He's been doing well on the season. He's still a fine play, but the touchdown upside obviously isn't the greatest. And then Jake Ferguson, you are just hunting for that touchdown for the most part with him at this point in the season, but there's no reason to think that won't come through against Detroit. Really, not a great tight end matchup though either. Zach Ertz against Minnesota, a so-so tight end matchup. Nothing impressive, nothing bad about it. I think maybe on the higher end for targets by a little ways against them to the tight end position, but coming off of a very good week, so love that. Dallas Goedert going against the Los Angeles Chargers. He's been one of the better tight ends on the season, but ended up putting him at the bottom of this tier. And then Mark Andrews, the experts have been trying to attack this. They're going for it a third week in a row. I'm still, optimistic about it. Yet again, a good tight end matchup here against Pittsburgh. They might even be that second best tight end matchup. So it is another strong matchup for Mark Andrews. The good thing about last week was he got like 5-6 targets. I want to say it was 5, but he got a good amount of targets last week. So maybe we can continue to see at least that floor happen, and then you hope against Pittsburgh here that touchdown game happens again as well. Then we've got the last group of tight ends that I do feel comfortable enough playing out there, but I did make a tier break here prior to Oronde Gadsden, who is going to be my fade of the week. We talked about it, 3 straight games with, a 6.1 full PPR, pretty much below average types of performances in each of those games to maybe bad. I didn't look at each individual scoring. So, Oronde Gadsden against Philadelphia, it's a bottom 2 tight end matchup. very clearly like they're just a very good team against tight ends for a reason. So I don't get too excited about that. Darren Waller, then we got here next going up against New York Jets. Reason to put him out there. Colston Loveland going up against Green Bay. It's a really good tight end matchup, so I did boost him up in the rankings a little bit there because the rest of these guys don't necessarily have good tight end matchups for Dalton Schultz and Harold Fannin. And it's looked a little bit better for Colston Loveland as of late, and maybe that will come to a head this week, and he'll get that touchdown and enough targets as well for that floor. Dalton Schultz, Harold Fannin right behind that. Dalton Schultz has been consistently fine on the season. Harold Fannin, pretty much a similar story, with a little bit more touchdown upside to him so far in the season, but I think at least he scored more touchdowns than Schultz. But yeah, that's just kind of where they're parked. Evan Ingram right behind that, coming off of a good week against Vegas, higher implied point total type of game. So, okay, fine. We can attack that, I guess. Not getting too excited about it, but a little bit more, I think, happy to try, that at least he has his target floor here compared to AJ Barner. TJ Hawkinson gets a little bit more targeted with Max Brosmer, but expect that to go back down. It was also a good tight end matchup last week. Expect that to go back down here for with J.J. McCarthy and at quarterback. Mason Taylor, actually, I do think low-key a good play this week going up against Miami. I would rather do that in, DFS types of lineups, pay for him in those types of lineups. I'm sure he'll be popular this week for that purpose. But if you're in a bind and, you like me and you've been playing Cade Otton and Mason Taylor happens to be available, I would rather take a chance on him. Chico Conquo still ranking here. Luke Musgrave right behind that against Chicago. Could see him end up coming up with a touchdown or something and a big play. Cade Otton, Mike Gesicki, Darnell Washington, David Njoku, Taysom Hill. You could almost make maybe Darnell Washington should be at the top of this tier. I don't know. These are all just guys I hope you're not having to play once we get into this tier, and the further down, the less that I hope you're having to play him. So currently not ranking Dawson Knox because I'm expecting Dalton Cade to return. There's no guarantee there. Brock Wright, I think, is on IR, actually, I believe. Tyler Higbee might be the same story there. I don't know for sure. Not like you're going to probably play him anyways if he's playing. Those are the quarterback and the tight end rankings. Thank you so very much for tuning on in. Please don't forget to like the video. If I didn't ask for that earlier, I should have. It really, really does help the algorithm, and tends to help out when I ask for that early in the video, and sometimes I forget to, and I don't want to do it every single time. But that's it. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Let's go. Once again, Thursday, Sunday morning. I'm here live to answer your start-sit questions. Peace out.